Jack, interesting you mentioned NATO. At this point, the latest was that NATO countries and allies in NATO, they're going to have a bad future if they do not pay heed to the requests that are coming out from Trump asking for them to deploy their assets in the Strait of Hormuz. Can NATO decline Trump's demand for help at this point?
At this point, NATO is able to decline Trump's demands for help because Article 5, the clause of the North Atlantic Treaty that would require NATO's involvement, hasn't been triggered. There was talk that it might be triggered when Turkey or American assets in Turkey were attacked by Iran. But if that mechanism is not called into effect, I don't really see NATO being involved. I think Trump is trying to put together some sort of coalition of the W. Bush did for the war in Iraq. That's where, rather than using NATO, he simply sought the support of willing countries, willing participants in the conflict. I think that's sort of what Trump's doing now. I'm not sure if he'd be willing to really test NATO to that degree by trying to trigger Article 5. It's certainly possible. Trump definitely has a brash and unpredictable style, but I think ultimately he'll make these threats. He'll have this bluster, or he'll frame it as tough love, and then he'll have to walk it back to some degree because of getting directly involved at this stage.
Yeah, and Jack, very quickly, I'll just try to get one more, quick exchange with you. There was a stance that NATO took when it came to Greenland. In the most recent, we're seeing Australia and Japan also saying, no, we don't want to send our military assets to the region. There has been, very evident apprehension from other partners, France, UK, from sending their assets to the region. Do you feel the strength in saying no to Trump or to the US is growing among their own partners and allies at this point?
It's certainly possible. I think, there have been times over the last couple of American partners have been willing to say no. There were some American partners who have worked closely with the United States who were unwilling, for instance, to send troops into Iraq during the US invasion under George W. Bush. I think, with Trump, we're seeing NATO and other US partners being required to say no with greater frequency. Like you mentioned with Greenland, we saw it earlier this year. I think US partners are saying no more and more frequently, is putting a strain on America's alliances around the world. And that could certainly worsen. I'm not sure if NATO is at a breaking point or anything. A lot over the course of its existence since 1945. There were periods in which major partners like France left the alliance outright. So I'm not sure if NATO is really reaching a breaking point, but there's certainly tension right now, and that's probably going to get worse.
Well, Trump seemed definitely buoyed by his escapade in Venezuela, what they were able to achieve in the matter of a few hours, most recently in January, and then last year in the 12-day war, where they were able to exchange, carry out and whatever they had to complete in that Operation Midnight Hammer through targeting Iran's nuclear facilities. But this time, and Trump has mentioned this himself, that Iran is far stronger than they had expected. He said it, I'm paraphrasing here, but that's the sense you're getting from the US with repeatedly these statements coming out. I think it seems like they've chewed up more than they could. They've bitten more than they could chew. But at this point, they're getting more of their partners to come in and associate and the Strait of Hormuz, because that has become Iran's play, and they never minced their words in the beginning. Jack, thank you so much for joining us here on the broadcast. A pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you.